My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. You know what we're here for. We talk about the things that too often gay men don't talk about. And one of the things that often can happen is we have a life hiccup. Let's start that way. And sometimes the hiccup can be a really big hiccup. And then we start to wonder, how am I going to get through this? What's going to guide me there? How am I going to manage this craziness? And what I have learned along the way, and what today's guest has learned along the way, is you just got to take the steps forward, whatever that looks like. It may test you, it may challenge you, whatever it is doing, you got to take the steps. And sometimes those steps take you in a direction after you've had a big life hiccup that maybe you didn't anticipate, and you suddenly realize without that, you wouldn't be as comforted and ready to move forward. Today, I'm speaking with a gentleman by the name of Mickie Kennedy. He has written a book of poetry about something that came up for his world, and it kind of it just sparked something in him to like, yes, I'm going forward. I'm going to go do this. And I would love to have Mickie join me at this point and talk about his beautiful book, his poetry, what was the big life hiccup that came along in his world, and how he used that to catapult him forward. So, Mickie, welcome to the podcast, man. So glad you're here.
Well, thanks, Rick, for having me.
Of course. So I'm not going to tell everybody what the name of the book is, because it could kind of expose what everything was about. But maybe let's start with let's start. You had this, what I called the life hiccup. So let's talk about the life hiccup a little bit, man.
So I had colon cancer about 7 years ago, and I get routine scans. And a couple of years ago, they told me that my prostate was being calcified. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound good. And I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, there's not much you can do. And I said, well, what's it mean? They said, it could develop into cancer. We'll just keep an eye on it. And of course, I guess about a year later, it looked like we needed to do a biopsy, and it did come back as cancer early, but still. There's no treatment for prostate cancer that really doesn't involve destroying the prostate. And what that means as a man, and their virility and ability to maintain an erection and all kinds of other things. So it was something that I did not want to do anything about. And doctors like, hey, you have some time. If you took a year, it's not going to go, grow out of control. We sent it out. It's not an aggressive prostate cancer, but you have to deal with it. And so I, researched everything I could. I tried herbal treatments. I went down a lot of paths to avoid the inevitable, but in the end, it was still progressing. The PSA levels were rising, and I made the decision to do radiation and hormone treatment. And all through this period, I am writing about it. I had a master's in fine arts and creative writing 30 years ago. Took 20 some years off of not writing poetry, and grew a business. And then probably about the same time I got the colon cancer, I started writing again. And I didn't write very much about the colon cancer because it literally was, I didn't feel well, went to the hospital, and then I wake up a few hours later and they've taken out a third of my colon and said, you had colon cancer. And there was fortunately no radiation, no real treatment beyond that other than scans, because it was basically, I think, a lymph node, no, not a lymph node, a polyp that became cancerous. And they felt, like it hadn't moved to the lymph nodes. They'd done tests like that. So the outcome was looking good. But now now I'm down two cancers, and I'm like, I hope there's not a third. But
Right.
I did agonize quite a bit, with the prostate cancer and what life looked like after that, because I came out gay rather late in life.
Mm,
I sort of went back into the closet in graduate school,
mhm.
seeing so many people um, die of AIDS.
Yeah.
And my
Mhm.
uncle lost every lover that he had, every friend. None of them survived. He
Mm,
inherited the estate of, like, I'd say 10 or 11 men. And they all had been turned away by their families who felt like AIDS was justice. This was rural North Carolina. And I couldn't deal with that. And I was dating someone in graduate school, and I went to his apartment early one day after getting out of class and found him with someone else. And I'm just like, this is exactly how people get AIDS. And I just felt
right.
like I'm I need to stop. And so I
Mm,
just became asexual from that point. And me and my best friend in graduate school is a woman who is asexual with her for her own reasons. We just stuck it out together. And I guess about 11, 12 years ago, she was like, AIDS isn't what it used to be. Maybe you should go out and find someone. And I did go out and find my husband. And it's been a journey.
oh, I'm
But
sure.
I had a window, and
Hmm.
then that part of that, the physical, the sexual part, is different now.
I'm sure
And
it is.
so I felt like poetry and writing for me was a way to process it, deal with it. And a lot of my poetry is humorous. There's a
Hmm.
lot of humor in there. I feel like it has to be
Right.
because if you're not able to laugh about a situation, it can really feel like it's spiraling at times. And so I've found this was my outlet. It's what I needed. And I certainly want to get out there and communicate it with the world. I had a friend who suggested I send the manuscript off for a chapbook contest, and I won. And so that's why it's
Wow.
coming out this year, and I'm very proud of it.
I would be too.
I feel like it's got some of my best writing in it.
Hmm.
I feel like there's nothing else like that out there,
Hmm.
and I found that the whole experience of going through prostate cancer and treatment, there's just a lot of stuff that people don't say.
Hmm.
I talked to my oncologist a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned, hey, I can still orgasm, but nothing comes out, and he's like, oh my God, he's like, I can't believe you can orgasm, and I'm
Right.
like, you never said anything about that before. And he goes, yeah. He goes, we don't talk about it very much. I'm just like, but don't
But
you
don't
think
you
this is
think that
something
that's
someone needs to know going into all
exactly
this?
you? I've talked to other guys who've been through this, and you're not the first one that says no, they didn't want to talk about this because I guess it is devastating. Let's just go there, okay?
Right.
You know, even as a 60, almost 62-year-old guy myself, things aren't working the way they used to.
Right.
Erections, orgasms, they happen, but they're definitely, and I got my own stuff, two-time stroke survivor, all that stuff going on. Um, but mostly it's because I'm on quite a few different meds, heart meds, all that sort of stuff to keep things going. My doctor's like, well, yeah, that's going to happen because of all the meds you're on. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me this? I'm freaking
Right.
out. And I'm a guy who has kidney stones too. And I won't go into that too deep because listeners have heard that story. But I was being treated with some kidney stone medicine on a vacation once. And well, I had a kidney stone on vacation. They gave me some meds to kind of deal with it. And suddenly I'm like, okay, well, I want to jerk off. I just want to get off. Nothing came out. I was hard as a rock and everything. And so, of course, I'm freaking out. It's like, oh my God, the stone, it's going to, which the stone isn't. That isn't where that's going to happen anyway. But it's devastating for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
I'm curious because, okay, just the way you just told your story, I think you and I have some similarities in where we were in life. It's interesting that you had this uncle figure. I had the same thing. My uncle happened to pass away from AIDS. And I had this freak out moment. Like, oh, if I'm gay, this is what's going to happen to me. And it was we didn't know a lot back then. I mean, like literally, this was at the very beginning of this whole thing. And it honestly, Mickie, it put an edge on me. And it is what caused me to go back in the closet. I'm grateful, kind of similar to you, that I did go back in the closet because I don't think I'd be having this conversation today. I think I would have been a young, naive, at that point, 20-year-old college guy going, fine. And, in a family where this isn't acceptable. My whole life, my uncle was, president in our world. They accepted, but they didn't, So there was the thing that was hanging over my head was, oh, look what happened here. But I also see it as a blessing because I grew and I matured. I figured out what I did want. I have the blessing of having 2 biological children, which was something I really wanted. Not, I didn't have to be biological, but having a family. But then when I woke up like you, there was this like, oh, there's this whole other piece in life that I have. So I'm curious in the poetry, how much of it, I mean, you said you were writing along those lines, but clear back when you decide to go back into the closet, is there pieces of that show up in the book? Obviously, there's current stuff. There's the prostate stuff. I'm sure there's stuff from the past.
There's a little bit of that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's some of that past that's in there. Yeah, but there's only so much you could fit into this book here. But I do have another larger book that comes out later that deals a little bit more of that sort of backstory and going into that.
So why poetry? I mean, I know somebody's out there listening going, okay, well, why does he have a poetry book? Why didn't he just write a novel? I mean, there's something about poetry that had to call to you.
Well, I've always been drawn to poetry. I am diagnosed ADHD later in life, but it's always been there. I don't think I could sustain a novel. I feel like I am, I get in there, I build something, and then I look back and go, wow, that's cool. And I don't think I could sustain a novel. I don't think I have it in me.
I get you.
I wish I could, but I think that I'm just, the size of a poem is something that I feel I'm able to do with my attention span, and I feel like it's something I can craft. And I also think that some of the language, or maybe the tools of poetry, like the metaphor and things like that, and the turn that usually happens in a poem, is one of the things that I feel works well in this scenario.
I love that because having written a book, fairly long book, and having written a second book that's sitting here on my desk waiting for me to do something with it, it takes a lot, and mine are not novels. They're like, well, the first one is more memoir, how to come out later in life. So that one was actually, quote, easy, so to speak, because I can tell my story, and then here's things to do, here's ways to walk yourself through it. This other one now is more of a self-help genre sort of book for gay men, and it took me a couple of years to write it. And now here it sits staring at me all the time going, so you did all this. What are you going to do with me now? Because it needs a big edit. And I hate it's so funny. I can edit everybody else's work. I just can't stand editing my own. But I think there's that piece of finding where your lane is, what brings you alive, what turns you on. And what I heard you just say is that's what works for me. And you're honoring that in yourself.
Yep.
So I know somebody's probably, if they were sitting here going, okay, ask him this question. How did these poems come to you? Where would you be like, oh, sitting there and like, oh, let's write this down? Or you'd be sitting down, okay, now I'm going to go write. Or is it kind of a mixture of both?
It's kind of a mixture of both. There was, one incident where, after the calcified prostate diagnosis, the recommendation was frequent masturbation. And there's a time where I'm going at it, and the husband calls and he says, Mickie, there's a dying baby bird on the driveway. Come out right now. And I'm like, I'll be out in a few minutes. And then he keeps calling and he keeps calling. And the poem is about that. And that's the opening poem in the manuscript. And It basically ends with, if if someone's going to die, I'd rather it be the bird than me. And so it's let it be
Okay,
the
so there's
bird,
the humor. I can see the wicked sense of humor here. That's
right?
funny.
But it's just a very strange situation.
Right.
And there's just a lot of little things like that that happened. There was a surgical procedure where they put fiducials in, I guess, my midsection so that
Hmm.
the radiation can be precise. And if there's a gas bubble or a slight shift, the the machine knows, so that it's not going to move the radiation around. And as I'm leaving, the nurse doesn't give me any aftercare advice. And yet, fortunately, I'd gone to Reddit and had learned that, the bud is off limits for 3 months
Mm.
after that. And, as a gay man, that would have been something interesting to have been
To
told.
know.
And, but I just feel like it's just like it's ignored. And it's almost to
Mm.
the point that's negligent in a way that my partner was there. And yet the doctor didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. But because I had been to Reddit and I had looked into it, I knew. But it's
Mm.
like if I hadn't done it, who knows? Something
Who
bad
knows
could have
what could
happened.
happen?
And it's a lot of things like that. And it's not like, I don't think anyone's making the deliberate decision to like give you substandard care, but the result is that's what you're getting because
Mm.
they just are sort of uncomfortable or not willing to just talk about it or deal with it.
So I'm just curious, is that poem called "The Bud is Off Limits"?
No, it's called inserting the fiducials.
I
I
love
just
it.
love the word fiducials.
That's an interesting word. Now, as you were talking about, I'm like, oh, the butt is off limits. That would be a great book title. It could be a great. I mean, it could be a
Right,
great
right.
segment on any TV show. It's really funny. Actually, I may steal that because I'm like, oh, because
Go
there's a
for it.
there's a friend of mine who did a stand up comedy routine. We shared the stage, and he interjects like no butt stuff at the very beginning, and he ends his routine with, but again, no butt stuff. And it's really funny how it's like as simple as those words are, it's really humorous because many gay men are like, really, no butt stuff, and others are like, no butt stuff whatsoever. And it's really interesting to see that. For you, I'm sure, like for most of us who've gone down the venture of even writing an article or writing several articles or a poem or a book or anything, what was the biggest transformation for you personally? Because it changed my world so many ways.
So I don't know if there's been a big giant transformation for me. I think it's just it's a way that I healed
Mm,
and survived and coped
mm,
and turned something I feel like it's kind of beautiful that I want to
mm,
share with the world. I kind of feel like a lot of stuff that I brought forth is a lot of stuff that the medical community isn't talking about. I think that even a straight person who's been through prostate cancer can appreciate stuff in there.
mm,
There's an ode to my prostate called Dearest Prostate, where basically I'm saying goodbye to it
mm.
and going through the history of sexual experiences along the way there. So it's just a place where I was able to process, and I feel it, poetry helped me get through this. And
Yeah.
I hope that it's something that people will be able to appreciate and find the humor in it, as well
Mm.
as, the humanness that's there and the struggle and the healing and everything that goes along with that.
Well, what I just heard you say is there was a transformation, just the healing
Yeah.
and the getting through it and everything. That's a transformation. And sometimes people think, oh, it's got to be some big thing, which in its own way, what you just described was a big thing. There was healing and stuff that you desired and needed to experience. I'm sure some of the listeners are going, well, that sounds like some good stuff to me. I could use some of that healing and how to be here and be present and all, because we struggle with this as humans. Most of us struggle with like, how do I be, how to become more present. It's one of the biggest things that people say, or how to find peace in your own way. I'm sure that's what delivered for you. And I think it's almost one of the things we don't give ourselves permission to go experience is whatever it is that you keep thinking, oh, I wish I had more of this, or oh, I wish that wasn't any longer in my presence. Go give yourself permission to figure out how you move through that. It may not be going to therapy every week. Not knocking that at all, guys. Trust me, I'm a big fan of therapy. But it could be, I think I'm just going to go write a poem. Or it could be, I'm going to go try a new recipe and see if I really have what it takes to maybe become a chef. None of these things have to be over the top. In fact, I remember it was interesting as you were talking through this, Mickie. There's a painting, not in this room that I'm in, guys, but there's a painting in our bedroom. And we had a bunch of leftover paints and stuff from doing a house, remodel and all this stuff. Plus, I had decided I wanted to dabble in painting. And one Sunday, it was one of those Sunday mornings where you wake up as a couple and you're like, just go do what you want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. There was no planned agenda. Okay. So have my coffee. I get up. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to go out in the garage. Well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to I need to do something with my hands. About 45 minutes later, he finally ventures out and I had this big easel up with a big canvas. Like I'm talking, I think this canvas is probably 36 by 36. So a really large canvas. I had no idea, Mickie, what I was going to do. I'm just like, I'm going to do something. And I ended up painting this picture that's just, let's just say it's kind of like tribal naked ghost men, so to speak. They're all white. They all have penises. But it's very tribal looking. Like each guy has his own little. I got that done and I literally painted in like less than probably 2 hours. And suddenly there was this release I had. Like this, okay, that's what I needed. I just needed to be in full creativity mode, not having a plan. And it is one of the pictures that hangs in our bedroom that when people come and tour our house and everything, people comment on. Like, where'd you get that one? Who did that one? I'm always kind of shy, like, oh, I did. They're like, really? I didn't know, And I think this is what you're inviting guys to. Is like, you took the poetry. You took something really painful and literally painful and, life-changing and turned it into something really, really beautiful. But the thing we haven't talked about is the name of the book. The reason I didn't want to say it is because it kind of ties to everything that you experience. So the name of the poetry book is what?
Glandscapes.
Like literally, guys,
landscapes with
like
a G in front of it.
Yes, yeah, not landscapes, glandscapes. And I love it because it really is kind of tied to all the glands and everything that could get affected by this.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things I heard most that inspired me in talking to you through this so far is your willingness and acceptance to accept, okay, this is my journey and move forward. But I don't feel like you've said, oh, yeah, it was a piece of cake. It probably wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was challenging
some of the
and
toughest
scary.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, tough and scary, I'm sure. I mean, I guess you kind of brought this up, but the thought of, and again, guys, if you don't know much about prostate cancer, first of all, I would invite you to go first have a conversation with a doctor. Number one, get online and learn about it because it is life altering. There's a lot of what you've described, Mickie, right? Like you can lose capability to have orgasms, erections, sex drive goes down, and so as a man, and especially as a gay man, you can almost feel like your life has come to an end. But you must have a really loving, supportive partner that the two of you have figured it out beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's something that you had to shift in your own mind to go, okay, besides the poetry, but you had to shift in your own mind to go, okay, I'm marching forward?
I think facing what the alternative would be to just sit down and give up, that's not acceptable.
Right.
It's not, it's not what I wanted to do. I felt like I would. I felt like I would get depressed and just sort of want to just sit down and just be dark. But no, I had this drive to just want to get through this and see what life's like on the other side and make the best of it. And that's what I'm doing.
I can tell. Because there's just such a unique beauty to the way you talk and the way you're sharing. And I guess I can kind of relate to it because after I had my first stroke, and it was a stroke, no doubt, it wasn't just a whatever they call it, TEP or something like that. It wasn't what it was an actual stroke. I was out of the hospital within 24 hours, so I was very lucky. It started to weigh in on me. I'm like, okay, but if you start to worry about it, you're not going to make things better.
Right.
The second one was a little more of a shock and surprise that it was happening. And I wasn't out in 24 hours, not because I couldn't have been. I just lots of complications with hospital protocol. Let's just go down that way. Okay. A lot of people not communicating with each other. I'm sure you probably experienced some of that in your journey.
Yes.
And since then, I have to say, I'm probably more aware. In fact, I don't think I have it here in front of me. But my husband and I just were in New York City and saw Adina Menzel and her show Redwood, which I think it's already closing. But there's a line that says, "While you're alive, live." And out of the entire show, that's the one thing I remember. I mean, it was great to hear her sing and everything, but ever since I've heard that, I'm like, it takes me back to my strokes, takes me back to every moment I wake up, every day that I start cursing and swearing about stuff, and just remind myself, while you're alive, live. And I feel like what you've shared with us today is this is Mickie. While he's alive, he's living. So what's next? You said you had another book potentially, right?
Yeah. So I have a sort of a larger book that's coming out next year. And it's sort of about my childhood and then, coming out gay in rural North Carolina, then going back into the closet. Also had two children with some medical intervention with my best friend. And just, the journey of that and then finding, being told go out and find someone and finding my husband.
Right.
I remember I downloaded an app, or I guess it was a website at the time. It was probably pre-app, and I showed a picture of him to my wife, and she's like, "Hey, he's kind of young. You could have fun with him, but probably won't lead anywhere." And that's been like 11 years we've been together. The first guy I dated. So, but yeah, it's been wonderful. I feel lucky to have, the family that I have. My best friend's still my best friend, and she's here every day, and she's very close to Randy, my partner, and it's been a great life. It's a non-traditional life, but I felt like, what my perspective of it was way back when I needed to go back into the closet for a couple of decades, and it's so difficult having seen my uncle go through what he went through. He's only a few years older than me. I think like 8 years older than me. So there's a big difference between him and my mother. My mother was the oldest, he was the youngest, and a surprise child. And so I've always felt like he's more of a cousin in a lot of respects. But he hasn't had an easy life because of everything he lost and everything that he sort of went through.
It's so valuable to even hearing you talk about him. It's so valuable to hear those stories, though,
Right.
because I feel like this is something that's been lost in the younger generation. And I don't want to knock the millennials and the Gen Zers, because they're paving roads that we never got to pave in so many different ways.
Right.
But sometimes I feel like they need to hear these stories of what really was going on to really appreciate why they can pave the roads so much easier now than what we could have.
Sure.
And I'm not holding it against them. I'm just saying I invite a lot of them into conversations. And it's interesting at times you can get some that will really engage, and then you get those like, why should this matter to me? I'm like, it should matter to you for so many reasons, because you wouldn't be where you are if and I'm not saying me, if we as a gay culture hadn't paved the roads. And we're seeing it unfolding right now in our society, like, wow, everything that we thought we had, potentially rolling back in different ways. But that's a whole nother podcast. So So I'm really glad that you took time out of your day to be with us. Again, shout out the book name so they hear it one more time.
It's Glandscapes, and you can find it by going to glandscapes.com, and it's just glandscapes.com, and it'll take you there. I do have a quick poem I could read if you're
I'd love that.
open to
Before
that.
we wrap up,
Okay.
absolutely. Why don't you?
Since
read
we
us
just
one
talked
of your
about my
good forwards?
uncle and him
Yeah.
losing everything, he does have a presence of the poem and sort of puts a perspective on it. And this poem was in Poetry Magazine, and it's called "What My Uncle's Dead Lovers Left Behind." A house with a pool missing tiles, another house, foundation cracked, the whole left half off kilter, like a face mid-stroke. A Buick with a vinyl roof, a dented Datsun truck, a Pekingese that needed each summer to be shaved. Mismatched recliners, a leather sofa, a china hutch with no china, a rusted fastback Mustang suspended on blocks, his boyfriend's last project. My uncle, untouched by the disease, a king of worthless things. His spare bedroom almost impossible to enter, the bed buckling, 2 microwaves, boxes of old Playgirls, a tower of coffee table books, a case of unopened Billy beer, a milk crate filled with drag show trophies, Miss Eastern Carolina, Miss Congeniality, third runner-up.
There's history in that poem in a huge way, in a very huge way. But it's also very stirring to think about what we inherit that can't help us forget the past, but helps us move forward too. There's so much in that. So thank you so much for sharing that one. That's really beautiful, Mickie. And guys, that's a preview of what else that, I know some of you are like, I never read poetry. If you weren't moved by what you just heard, I'm going to invite you to consider digging a little deeper, because I loved it, Mickie, because it was really short, very sweet, easy to comprehend, but such impact, such huge impact. As soon as you said the Playgirls, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those stacks of Playgirls in my uncle's house. When I'd go to he and his partner's house going, oh, what's that? But I couldn't say that because we don't talk about that, even though, my mom and dad were very much hippies and very, all that. It's like, oh, and I always remembered, like, when the adults would leave the room, I'd figure out a way to get over there real quick and like start looking.
Right.
I didn't really understand who I was at that point, but I knew I really liked looking at that. I knew I really liked looking at those magazines. So thank you for bringing that memory alive to me, man. I appreciate that. Seriously, I'm not being sarcastic, guys. Sometimes those are the warmest memories of, oh yeah, there was my little gay boy just waiting to come alive. So, well, Mickie, thank you so much for sharing with us and being part of it. Again, guys, Landscapes is the name of the book. We will have everything available on the website, how you can connect with Mickie, find the book, order the book, all those good things. And don't stop doing this, Mickie. I love it. You're definitely a talent, and I'm glad you showed up in my world, and I really appreciate you, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.